Hello, everyone, and welcome to CantoSense, where we are embracing Chinese culture for Christian living. My name is Hannah Lau. I'm originally from Canada. I am first generation Hong Kong Chinese, and I've spent my adult life here in Asia, first in China, then Singapore, and now I live in Hong Kong.
Well, hello, Hannah. I'm Ai Thomas, and I am a third generation Malaysian Chinese. It's my great grandparents who are actually from China. I've lived in different parts of the world, in Turkey, in the US, and now I am based in Singapore. And recently I've written a book called Jesus, the Path to Human Flourishing. And I think that sort of also served my interest in wanting to do this as well.
So before our very trusting audience clicks away, let's tell them, what is CantoSense? What is this?
Out there are a lot of platforms, a lot of YouTube channels that actually deals with the Chinese culture, that talks about Asian food, Asian culture.
Really good ones.
They're really good ones, and we're not trying to be that, because ultimately this is about the biblical faith and the Chinese culture. There are many aspects of our earthly Chinese culture that may on the surface seem incompatible with the Christian faith, but that's the case with every culture.
Right.
Whenever and wherever I give a talk about Chinese culture and Christianity, without a doubt, questions about Chinese traditions and rituals would arise. Like, for example, can I participate in the funeral rites of my mother or my parents? Or would making a personal decision to follow Jesus compromise my identity as a Chinese? Or would it make me a daughter who's not filial? I was speaking in Perth. After my talk, this young man from mainland China, he introduced himself and he said, I've been coming to this church since I've moved to Australia. And I've been very interested in Jesus. And in fact, I've gotten to a point where I really want to believe in him. And I said, wow, what's stopping you? He said, well, it's related to something that you said today, is that you can be fully Chinese and fully Christian, how that it's not an identity dilemma. So he said, when you said that, it really struck a chord within me, because I've always had this impression, and that becoming Christian means I will have to compromise on my Chinese identity. In other words, I would be less of a Chinese if I become a follower of Jesus. And so when I said, you can be fully Christian and fully Chinese, it got him very excited. And he said, wow, that means I actually am ready to become a follower of Jesus. Christianity in many parts in this part of the world, is seen as a Western religion and therefore not relevant. And it's unfortunate, because there are a lot of books on discipleship and spiritual formation out there that do not deal with issues, topics that are specific for us. How can we live as part of the Chinese culture while set apart for Christ? Is it even possible to begin with, or should we just reject everything about who we are? And I think this is what CantoSense is about, what we want to explore,
Right. And how to manage that tension, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Because it's not a straight, yes, you can do this, no, you cannot do that. I mean, I've heard many times, can Christians play mahjong, And in certain cases, I think it could be a clean line, a clean, black and white. But I think in so many other cases, we need to talk about it. Before CantoSense became what you described it to be, that sort of the background, but actually it kind of started with conversations between you and me. It was a thing before it became a platform. And what we really boiled it down to be is CantoSense is essentially the nuances and signatures of Chinese culture that have persisted and prevailed over generations and geographies. So anytime someone has said, well, that's just what Chinese people do, or no, we just do it like that, of course we do it like that, that's CantoSense. It's just what we do as a Chinese culture that has this amazing way of bringing people together, right? I mean, it's kind of how you and I just started talking about this stuff. There was this first sort of like eureka moment that we had. I think it was about like, okay, Sam, right? And you know, I grew up, you know, knowing what okay, Sam, which is house clothes. And we'll do an episode on that quite soon, actually. So stay tuned for that. But the first time I mentioned okay, Sam, and you were like, hey, you do okay. How do you know what okay, Sam is? I'm like, oh,
Exactly.
of course I know what okay,
Exactly.
Sam
And we
is.
compared and found that, you know, how we define okay, Sam and how we get to okay, Sam is exactly the same.
It's and it's incredible how, you know, the culture manages to travel for better and for worse, you know, and
Yeah.
really transcend generations.
See, when we think about the Christian faith and about being a Christian, what does that mean, right? I mean, it's not just about going to heaven after we die. It's not just about conversion alone. It's about discipleship. We are being discipled into true followers of Jesus. It's about finding harmony in our relationships. First, you know, we have to be reconciled to the Father because there need to be harmony in our relationship with God the Father before we will find true harmony in all our relationships, even relationship with ourselves. I mean, none of us are truly happy with ourselves. You know, this is what salvation brings. You know, conversion ought to bring harmony into all aspects of our life, which leads into the whole idea of biblical of shalom or human flourishing and true prosperity. And it's interesting because Chinese people, cultural Chinese, place so much importance into prosperity. I mean, Chinese New Year, you know, you see, or you go to any Chinese shop, you know, they often, there we go, this fellow right here.
Hey, you have one. Okay.
Yes.
Isn't that all the prosperity you need? That's what I'm told. All you need is a cat doing this and you're prosperous.
Yeah, if only it's that simple, but no. When you read the psalmist asking God to prosper him, it really is a true sense of prosperity. It's not just merely financial or material.
Right.
It's such a rich idea of flourishing, of doing well in the Lord, not a prosperity gospel kind of, you know, prosperity.
Right. Yeah.
But living in a way that God has intended us to live. I think it's often we are lazy, you know, and we don't want to do the hard work of thinking through what are the values, what are the beliefs that undergird some of these traditions and rituals. Because I think once you get down to that, you figure that a lot of these values are good, but it's the way we expressed it has been tainted by sin or by other belief systems. So there is a lot of work that can be done in terms of either redeeming these cultures or developing or coming up, creating new rituals and traditions to express these values that are good, or in some instances we have to reject. By doing CantoSense, we're not saying that Chinese culture is the only culture that needs redeeming, because you know, all other cultures, you know, are tainted by sin as well. And you know, it is the case that every culture, you know, would have aspects that we need to redeem and aspects that we need to reject. But this specifically, you know, we'll be looking at cultural Chinese culture. So
well, we want to start in our own backyard, right? For so many people who are just feeling stuck or trapped or struggling and just how do I deal with this? You know, hopefully in our discussions they'll feel like we're sort of loosening the knot a little bit, even if we're not totally untangling it. And so what we hope to do here at CantoSense is first insight. We want a deeper understanding. You don't have all the answers. I certainly don't have all the answers.
We don't.
Discussion. Like I said, it's not, you know, a one straight answer. So this is not meant to be a platform for debate or argument, but we want to discuss and learn from each other. And then finally, community for anyone who feels like they're alone in this. You're not. And that's very Chinese culture as well. It's also very Christian culture, that we are in this together.
The other thing too is that you may disagree with some of the things that we would be talking about, but that's okay. I think what is important is that we are surfacing these questions and examining them, exploring and discussing, and we are a step closer towards in the work of redeeming the Chinese culture for the kingdom. We've used the term cultural Chinese, or at least I use the term cultural Chinese
Yeah.
quite frequently. And there is really a reason for that, because when we think about the word Chinese, it can either be very limiting or very broad. On our platform, we prefer to use cultural Chinese. And of course, sometimes we lapse into just using the word Chinese, but really we want to be inclusive. And cultural Chinese, again, I do want to give the credit to, philosopher Tu Weiming. But in our case, when we use the term cultural Chinese, is to be inclusive in terms of diaspora Chinese, as well as mainland Chinese. I remember when I was visiting Vietnam, the north of Vietnam, these are Vietnamese. A lot of them don't even speak any Chinese language, but they were very Chinese in terms of their values and even their traditions.
Right.
And we would include them as well, because these are culturally Chinese people.
It's much more of a cultural context that binds us together, as opposed to a passport, nationality, ethnicity. I mean, your son, for example, is not fully Chinese, but he's Chinese enough to be participating in this. He's got some
rice is
CantoSense.
his favorite food. That's Chinese enough for me.
That's CantoSense right there. That's just good CantoSense, right? Okay, so who is this really for? I would say first and foremost, it's to help Chinese Christians deal with their Chineseness. I know I need help doing that. So we welcome anyone who feels like they need help dealing with their Chineseness within their Christian faith. And then secondly, is to help those who are non-Chinese, who might be ministering to or working with Chinese people, just to gain a deeper understanding of how to look at the Chinese culture through the Christian lens. We're going to be covering some really interesting topics. Things like faith, honor, shame, frugality and pragmatism, ancestral worship and rituals, Chinese parenting, communication styles, and even why the TV always has to be so loud. Don't you wonder about that? I wonder about that all the time. So we welcome you to join us on this adventure. It will be an adventure. So subscribe to our YouTube channel. Catch us on our next episode. It's going to be on Qingming Festival or Tomb Sweeping Festival. Follow us on social media. And finally, do contribute. Share with us your CantoSense.
As we began, we talked about, how our immediate response is not to reject, but to redeem. So hashtag not reject, but redeem.
Amen. See you again soon.
Yeah.